Imagine waking up in a house built literally 165 feet in the air. You aren't in a skyscraper or a modern condo. You are perched on a single towering tree trunk right in the middle of a dense, humid jungle canopy.
Right, and completely exposed to the elements.
Exactly. Or picture this scenario instead. You step out of your front door in the morning, coffee in hand, and you walk directly onto the roof of your neighbor's house.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. You do this because your village is built so vertically, so aggressively into the side of a sheer mountain that the roofs literally have to act as the streets. Welcome to our latest deep dive. Today we're taking you on a massive, sprawling, continent-crossing journey. We are going to explore the most beautiful, the most isolated, and the absolute most extreme villages scattered across Asia.
And really the core of what we're looking at today.
Our mission, essentially.
Right? Our mission is to figure out how human beings do more than just merely survive in these unforgiving, hostile landscapes. We want to understand how they beautifully and ingeniously adapt to them. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to realize that this deep dive isn't just a tour of unusual real estate. It's fundamentally about the unbreakable bond between geography, culture, and human survival.
Yeah, I mean, think about your own life for a moment.
Most of us live in environments where we've completely insulated ourselves from the earth.
Right, we have thermostats and grocery stores.
Exactly. But when you are stripped of modern conveniences, when you're entirely cut off from the global supply chain, you are forced into an intimate daily dialogue with the planet. The communities we are exploring today don't fight nature. They don't try to pave over it. They maintain a highly practical relationship with their environment, adapting to brutal climates by seamlessly integrating with them.
Okay, let's unpack this, because what we are really looking at here is the absolute pinnacle of human ingenuity. And to really grasp that, I want to start in places that seem to actively defy gravity.
The vertical citadels.
Yes. I want you to visualize the sheer, unforgiving rocky slopes of the Caucasus Mountains, specifically a village called Kinalug,
Up in Azerbaijan.
right in the Quapa region. It sits at an elevation of over 6,500 feet. The air is thin, the wind is biting, and the mountainside is incredibly steep. To deal with this, the stone houses of Kinalug are built directly against one another, cascading down the slope. And just like I mentioned earlier, the architecture is so tightly packed that the flat roof of a lower house is simultaneously the courtyard, the pathway, and the street for the house immediately above it. It's mind-boggling.
It forces a profound level of social intimacy, doesn't it?
Oh, completely.
When your physical foundation is literally the ceiling of the family living beneath you, the concept of a private, isolated household practically vanishes. The entire settlement functions as a single interdependent architectural unit. They utilize local stone to build incredibly thick walls and these very tiny windows.
Which you'd think would make it dark and gloomy, but
it's not an aesthetic choice. It is a thermal necessity to survive the long, brutal winters and the piercing highland winds. Because the geography has kept them so isolated, they've managed to preserve a completely distinct cultural identity.
they even have their own language, right?
They do. They speak an independent language unique to that specific mountain pocket. Their whole rhythm of life revolves around livestock herding and weaving wools, utilizing the very animals that also manage to survive on those steep inclines.
It makes me wonder what happens when you have a disagreement with your neighbor. You literally have to walk over their ceiling to leave your house.
You definitely have to resolve conflicts quickly.
Yeah, no kidding. But taking that stacked, cascading architecture a step further, I was looking into Shatili. This is a village deep in the Kevsereti Mountains of northern Georgia, right near the Russian border.
A fascinating place.
It really is. It looks similar to Kinalug at first glance. Stone houses clinging to a sheer mountainside staring down into a narrow river valley using that same stacked roof design. But Shatili has a totally different vibe. It doesn't look just like a village, it looks terrifyingly imposing.
Well, that's because it isn't just a village. Shatili functions as a unified military fortress.
A whole town as a fortress.
Exactly. This is where the adaptation shifts from purely environmental to geopolitical. You have to consider their location. They were sitting right on a highly volatile historical border. The houses in Shatili aren't separate standalone dwellings. They form a continuous, impenetrable architectural mass.
Just a sheer wall, essentially.
A sheer wall of watchtowers, living quarters, and defensive fortifications. The stacked roofs weren't just for spatial efficiency like we saw in Kinalug. They provided an elevated strategic defensive line.
So if someone attacked the village, the entire town basically operated as one giant castle.
Precisely. Each stone tower served as a living space for a family, but it was fundamentally an observation post and a stronghold. If an invading force managed to breach the lower levels, the villagers could simply retreat upwards,
Pushing the roofs?
using the tight, labyrinthine interior paths, the steep stone steps, and the vertical corridors to bottleneck the attackers. But what is truly fascinating here is how this military design also acts as a masterclass in thermal retention.
How so? Does packing the buildings together like a fortress actually keep them warmer?
Absolutely. Think about the thermodynamics of a standalone house.
Okay.
It has 4 exterior walls exposed to the freezing mountain winds. It loses heat rapidly. But when you cluster buildings that tightly together, sharing massive stone walls, you drastically reduce the total surface area exposed to the elements.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
The heat generated by human bodies cooking fires and livestock pools within that unified structure. The ambient heat of the entire community is trapped and shared. It's a perfect marriage of collective defense against human enemies and passive defense against the climate.
That is just brilliant. It's ultimate spatial and thermal efficiency. And you don't just see this vertical clustered survival technique in the Caucasus. Let's travel thousands of miles east over to Nepal,
Into the Humla region.
right deep within the Upper Limi Valley. There's a village called Til, sometimes referred to as Tila. You are at a staggering 13,450 feet up.
The air is incredibly thin up there.
Extremely. The landscape of the Himalayas here is dry, rocky, and almost completely barren, but then you see Til sitting there like this vibrant green ribbon of red barley fields clinging to the side of the mountain, and they use the exact same stacked roof clustered architecture. But here's the thing I kept turning over in my head. They aren't building a military fortress, so why cram everyone together so tightly?
It comes down to the absolute scarcity of arable land.
Right, because it's mostly vertical rock.
Exactly. In the Limi Valley, flat ground is practically non-existent. Every single square inch of flat earth must be dedicated to agriculture, to growing that red barley you mentioned, because that is the only way the community avoids starvation during the winter.
You literally can't spare the dirt to build a house.
You cannot waste fertile soil by putting a building on it. So they are forced to build on the rocky, unusable, sheer slopes, clustering tightly together to maximize their agricultural footprint.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though. The extreme geography of Tila doesn't just dictate how they build their houses. It completely dictates their family structure and their marriages.
This is a crucial point of adaptation.
In Til and throughout the Limi Valley, they practice a custom called polyandry, specifically fraternal polyandry. That is where one woman marries multiple brothers from the same family. I know that sounds shocking or completely foreign to a lot of modern sensibilities, but when you look at the landscape, it isn't about romance. It's about sheer survival.
It's a profound social adaptation to an unforgiving geography. If you look at standard inheritance practices in many cultures, land is divided equally among sons.
Right.
So if a farmer has 3 sons, his plot is cut into 3 smaller plots. In the next generation, those 3 plots are cut into 9.
And in a place like Til, where a family might only own a tiny fraction of an acre carved into a cliffside, dividing that land means the next generation literally won't be able to grow enough food to survive. The math just doesn't work.
Exactly. The margin for error is 0. You cannot afford to fracture resources. Fraternal polyandry solves this geographic constraint.
Because the brothers stay together.
Yes. By having all the brothers marry one woman, the family unit remains centralized. The tiny, impossibly steep farmland is never divided. The livestock isn't divided. The labor force of the brothers remains pooled to work that single challenging plot of land.
It's incredible.
The social structure is entirely downstream from the physical constraints of the mountain. The land stays intact, the family stays intact, and the village survives generation after generation.
It's a perfect logical equation to solve a geographic problem. And speaking of places with absolutely zero margin for error on a mountain, we have to talk about Purwotak Sung in Bhutan.
Tiger's Nest.
Yes, most people know it as the Tiger's Nest Monastery. To me, this is one of the most seemingly impossible architectural structures ever conceived by human beings. It's literally anchored to a sheer granite cliff face.
It looks like it's floating.
It really does. You're at an elevation of 10,236 feet, and the cliff plunges nearly 3,000 feet straight down into the Paro Valley. Just looking at a photograph of the spatial layout is enough to induce severe vertigo.
It's the ultimate physical manifestation of spiritual devotion. The location was chosen specifically for its inaccessibility.
The legend of Guru Rinpoche.
Yes, The legend states he flew to this exact cave on the back of a tigress to meditate in the 8th century. The architecture we see today was built around those original meditation caves in the late 1600s. The monastery consists of 4 main temples and residential shelters designed specifically to conform to the treacherous ledges of the rock.
And some of those original caves are agonizingly narrow, right? I was looking at how to enter certain shrines for worship. You have to squeeze through rock crevices so tight that only one person can pass at a time.
With thousands of feet of empty air right behind you.
Exactly. You literally have to leave the physical world behind to reach it.
You do. And the physical toll required to build it is staggering. There are no roads leading to Parotaxang. The only access is a steep, grueling trek through pine forests that eventually narrows to a path carved directly into the cliff, crossing over a deep chasm via a rickety bridge.
So they carried everything.
Every single stone, every piece of timber, every religious artifact had to be carried up that mountain on the backs of human beings or pack animals.
Which makes the events of 1998 so heartbreaking, but also so incredibly inspiring.
The fire.
Yeah. In April of 1998, a massive fire broke out. It swept through the main buildings and nearly destroyed the entire monastery. And because of its terrifying, isolated cliffside location, modern firefighters literally couldn't reach it.
They were helpless.
You can't exactly drive a fire engine up a 3,000-foot vertical goat path. It was completely inaccessible to emergency services, and much of it burned to ash.
It was a devastating cultural loss. But this raises an important point about resilience. When a structure is that difficult to maintain and it burns down, the logical modern response would be to rebuild it in a safer, flatter, more accessible location in the valley.
But they didn't do that. The Bhutanese people refused to abandon that sacred geography. The king of Bhutan commanded it to be rebuilt exactly as it was. And by 2005, they had successfully restored the entire complex in its exact original precarious position on that sheer cliff face.
Which is a monumental feat of engineering.
Think about the logistics of that in the early 2000s. They still couldn't use heavy machinery. They had to string up a massive cable car system just to haul the heavy timber and stone across the chasm, and the rest was still backbreaking human labor. Hauling materials up a 3,000-foot vertical drop day after day just to reclaim life and spirituality in that extreme terrain. It is awe-inspiring.
It's a beautiful testament to how deeply tied the architecture is to the specific spirit of the place. You cannot separate Tiger's Nest from the cliff. They are one and the same.
Absolutely.
But we want to talk about extreme human endurance. We eventually have to push even higher. We have to transition from villages that are stacked vertically on the sides of cliffs and move to the absolute roof of the world.
Right, because when you go higher, the challenges fundamentally shift. You aren't just fighting gravity and steep drops anymore. You are fighting the atmosphere itself.
You're fighting a terrifying lack of oxygen and brutal freezing temperatures.
Let's consider Kamik, a tiny remote village located in the Spiti Valley of India. It sits at an astonishing altitude of 15,051 feet.
That is just immense altitude.
To put that into perspective, that's roughly the height of the highest peaks in the Rocky Mountains or the Alps, and yet people are living there year-round. It is widely considered the highest village in the world, connected by a standard paved motorable road.
I can't even fathom trying to just catch my breath at 15,000 feet, let alone carry groceries or maintain a house.
The physiological adaptation is remarkable. You develop larger lung capacities, higher red blood cell counts.
But the psychological impact of living up there is equally profound. When you're situated gently across a steep mountainside overlooking a deep, massive valley at that altitude, the visual scale is difficult for the human brain to process.
You just feel so small.
Yes, the sense of open space is completely overwhelming. The sky doesn't feel like a dome far above you. It feels physically closer, as if it is pressing down on the landscape. The air is so thin and clear that the stars at night look terrifyingly bright. It creates an intense, heavy feeling of isolation. You are hyper-aware that the rest of the world is miles below you, and if a heavy snowstorm rolls in that paved road, becomes impassable, and you are entirely cut off.
And here is a detail about Kamik that completely blew my mind. You are at 15,000 feet. You're surrounded by the towering snowy peaks of the high Himalayas. You are as far away from an ocean as you can possibly get on this planet.
Right.
But if you walk around the barren slopes of Comic, you can easily find marine fossils just lying around in the dirt. You can pick up ancient ammonites, these beautiful spiral-shelled sea creatures, embedded right there in the rocks.
The contrast is jarring, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
How does a sea creature end up 3 miles high in the sky? It's because millions and millions of years ago, before the Indian tectonic plate crashed into the Eurasian plate to form the Himalayas, this exact section of rock was actually the floor of the ancient Tethys Ocean.
Geological time is a crazy thing.
The immense pressure of the continents colliding folded the ocean floor and pushed it up into the sky. So you are standing at the roof of the world, struggling to breathe the thin air, and you are holding a piece of the bottom of an ancient sea. That juxtaposition is just incredible to me.
It grounds you in the deep geological time of the Earth. You realize how transient human settlement really is. But Comic isn't the only settlement braving these extreme heights. Over in Tibet, sprawling across the Ali Plateau, there is a village called Tuiwa.
That's up on the plateau, right?
Yes, and the environment here is arguably even harsher. It is a high-altitude, cold desert. The horizon is constantly visible, flat and expansive, and the landscape is so incredibly arid that only very low, hardy vegetation can survive the persistent freezing winds that whip across the plateau.
If the wind is that bad, you obviously can't build a tall house.
No, a traditional pitched roof would act like a sail and be torn apart. And Tuiwa adaptation means lowering your profile. Their houses are built extremely low to the ground. They use incredibly thick, heavy stone walls to provide thermal mass against the cold, and they use entirely flat roofs. The houses are clustered tightly together to break the wind exposure, and their diet is completely dictated by the harshness of the plateau.
I imagine you can't grow much of anything up there.
Agriculture is largely impossible. They rely almost entirely on the animals that can survive the cold, namely yaks and sheep. Their sustenance revolves around yak milk, yak butter, tea-dried meat, and whatever provisions they can meticulously store to survive the brutal, isolating winters.
That kind of environment breeds a level of resilience that is hard for me to wrap my head around. And you see that same grit over in Pakistan in a place called Shimshal.
The village of mountaineers.
Exactly. Shimshal is another high-altitude cold desert, but it's surrounded by massive, imposing glaciers like the Yazgil Glacier. The terrain is so rugged and vertical that Shimshal has earned that nickname.
And it is a well-earned title. The sheer physical stamina required just to navigate the daily terrain in Shimshal is equivalent to professional athletic training. The village has produced some of Pakistan's greatest high-altitude climbers.
They're like Samina Beg.
Yes, exactly. Samita Beg, who is from Shimshal, became the first Pakistani woman to summit Mount Everest. The women of Shimshal are particularly renowned for their exceptional physical strength and endurance. They don't just stay in the village. They actively work as porters, professional climbers, and guides in highly dangerous, high-altitude expeditions across the Karakoram Range.
But the thing about Shimshal that really stopped me in my tracks was the story of their road.
Oh, the community road.
Yes. For centuries, this village was practically a myth to the outside world. To reach it, you had to undertake a highly dangerous multi-day trek on foot, crossing treacherous glaciers, terrifying rope bridges, and narrow ledges over roaring rivers. They were totally isolated.
Cut off from everything.
And they wanted a road. They wanted a connection to the outside world for medical emergencies and trade. But the government couldn't or wouldn't build one through that impossible terrain.
So the community took the matter into their own hands. And we are not talking about a community with access to a fleet of bulldozers and excavators.
No. I want you to picture this. The villagers themselves decided to carve a jeep road through the sheer rock cliffs of the gorge. And they did it by hand.
It's unbelievable.
They used iron crowbars, pickaxes, and whatever explosives they could pool their money to buy. They would dangle from ropes, chisel holes into the solid rock facepack in the explosives, detonate them, and then clear the heavy rubble by hand. And they did this day after day, year after year. It took them 18 years to finish it.
18 years of manual labor on a cliff edge. From 1985 until 2003, when the first Jeep finally rolled into Shimshal.
A child born when the project started would have been an adult by the time it was finished.
That is a level of collective community dedication that most of us living in cities can't even comprehend. We get annoyed if a pothole isn't fixed in a week. They spent nearly 2 decades moving a mountain by hand.
It really highlights how extreme punishing isolation creates incredibly strong community bonds. You don't survive 18 years of that without absolute trust in your neighbor.
It's the environment forcing a communal safety net. When you are that isolated, pure individualism is a death sentence. You have to operate as a collective.
You know, it reminds me of a completely different environment that produces the exact same social outcome.
Really, where?
If you leave the freezing Himalayas and go to the tropics, specifically to Batanes, the northernmost island province of the Philippines, the landscape is totally different, but the threat level is the same. Batanes faces some of the most extreme weather on planet Earth. They're constantly battered by relentless, massive typhoons coming off the Pacific Ocean, with winds regularly exceeding 120 miles per hour.
So a totally different kind of atmospheric violence?
Exactly, and their architecture reflects it. In villages like Chavayan and Savidug, they don't use light timber or bamboo like the rest of the Philippines. They build their houses entirely from local heavy coral stone and limestone.
They need the weight.
They leave the stone unpainted building thick, low walls, and they top them with incredibly heavy, thick roofs made of tightly woven kagan grass strapped down to survive the wind shear. But the real magic, the parallel to Shimshal, is their social adaptation.
How do they handle the aftermath of those 120-mile-per-hour winds?
Because they're frequently isolated by these massive storms with no outside help able to reach the islands for weeks, the Abatan people practice an ancient system called yaru.
Yaru.
Right, it translates to a form of cooperative labor. When a monstrous typhoon rolls through and damages a house or tears off a roof, the homeowner doesn't call a contractor. The entire village comes together. Everyone drops what they're doing and they collectively rebuild and repair the damaged home.
That's amazing.
No money exchanges hands. It's built on a deeply ingrained social contract. It's the exact same principle we see in the Himalayas. Extreme weather and extreme geography force people to rely entirely on each other. You survive as a collective or you're swept away.
That is a fascinating parallel to draw. Whether it is a blizzard in the Karakoram or a typhoon in the Pacific, the human response to overwhelming natural force is deep cooperation. We see another highly specific adaptation to high-altitude survival back in the Himalayas, specifically in Laya, a remote village in Bhutan.
That's the one on the Snowman Trek.
Yes, the Snowman Trek is widely considered one of the world's most grueling month-long high-altitude hikes. Laya is a critical stop along that route, sitting at roughly 12,500 feet.
That's up there.
Very much so. The architectural adaptation here is brilliant in its simplicity. They build two-story houses out of stone and timber, but the spatial layout is specific. The livestock, the yaks, the cattle, the mules occupy the entire ground floor. The human family lives on the floor directly above them.
Wait, so you are living directly above a barn full of yaks. Doesn't that get incredibly pungent?
It certainly has a distinct sensory profile, but the smell of livestock is a small price to pay for survival. This design is an ingenious, ancient, passive heating system.
Because of the body heat.
Yes, mammals generate a significant amount of body heat. By housing the large livestock directly below the living quarters, the heat from the animals rises through the floorboards and physically warms the family during the freezing Himalayan nights.
Wow.
It reduces their reliance on burning scarce firewood. The animals are protected from predators and freezing temperatures, and the humans get a massive biological radiator beneath their feet.
That is incredibly practical.
It is a perfect symbiosis. And culturally, the people of Laya are highly distinct. They identify as Layaps, and they have Tibetan origins. The women there wear these incredibly unique conical bamboo hats, which are held on by beaded straps and decorated with colorful beads and silver jewelry.
I've seen pictures of those. They're stunning.
It is a striking visual identity in such a bleak landscape. But what is particularly interesting about Laya is how their ancient rhythm of life was recently disrupted, or rather transformed, by their specific geography.
Oh, they're talking about the fungus.
I am. Laya experienced a massive, unprecedented economic boom from harvesting cordyceps.
You have to explain cordyceps to them.
For those who don't know, cordyceps sinensis is a bizarre parasitic fungus. It literally infects and mummifies a specific type of ghost moth caterpillar underground, and then a small stalk-like mushroom erupts out of the caterpillar's head.
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi horror movie.
It does, but in traditional Chinese medicine, it is highly prized and incredibly valuable, often referred to as Himalayan soft gold. Because it only grows at these extreme altitudes, the villagers of Laya suddenly found themselves sitting on a gold mine.
So they all harvest it.
During the brief harvesting season, the entire village empties out as everyone scours the high pastures for these tiny stalks. This influx of cash has brought solar panels, mobile phones, and modern clothing to an incredibly remote community. And yet, fascinatingly, despite this influx of modern wealth, Laya remains one of the very few places where they still practice polyandry.
Like we saw in Till.
Exactly. Even with the cordyceps money, they know that the physical land is still their ultimate anchor, and they refuse to divide it.
It's amazing how a single bizarre parasitic fungus can completely change the economic trajectory of a village so high up, yet the ancient social rules still hold firm. So we've explored the freezing arid highs, the sheer cliffs, and the absolute roof of the world. Now let's completely flip the script.
Okay, where to?
Let's plunge into a totally different extreme. The humid, lush, towering canopies of ancient forests and deep river valleys. Let's talk about the forest dwellers.
A completely different set of architectural and survival rules apply here.
Entirely. Remember at the very beginning of our deep dive when I asked you to imagine waking up 165 feet in the air?
Yes.
I wasn't exaggerating. I was talking about the Korowai people in the Papua province of Indonesia. The Korowai tree houses are arguably the highest form of everyday permanent human housing ever constructed on the planet.
And we aren't talking about a modern reinforced steel structure.
Not at all. They locate a massive, sturdy banyan or wanagam tree in the dense jungle. They clear the canopy and they build their homes directly on the trunks using absolutely no modern tools or nails.
Just local materials.
Just vines and wood. They start building at around 20 to 40 feet off the ground, but some families choose to build all the way up to roughly 165 feet above the forest floor. When you look up at them from the ground, they look like massive, intricate, boxy bird nests woven out of wood bamboo and sago palm leaves just suspended in the sky.
The logistics of just reaching the front door are terrifying.
That is the craziest part. The only way up to your house is a single, towering tree trunk that they have leaned against the main tree. They notch tiny footholds into it. It acts as a rudimentary ladder.
No handrails.
There are no handrails. There are no safety harnesses. There are no nets. If you slip at 100 feet, you are falling into the jungle below. Men, women, children, and even their hunting dogs make this incredible, death-defying daily climb.
It begs the question why? Why exert that much effort and take on that much daily risk just to go to sleep? The motivations behind the Korowai's extreme architecture are deeply rooted in both their physical environment and their cosmology.
Well, on a practical level, it makes sense.
Right. Elevating the house is a brilliant defense mechanism. The Papuan jungle floor is treacherous. Building high protects the family from swarming insects, wild animals, and the devastating, unpredictable flash floods that regularly sweep through the forest. Historically, it was also a critical defense against rival tribes. A house 100 feet in the air is essentially an impregnable watchtower. You can see enemies approaching through the canopy long before they reach you.
But there is a spiritual reason too, isn't there?
Yes, and it is arguably the most important reason to them. The Korowai have a deep-seated belief in malevolent spirits, specifically witches or sorcerers they call the kakua. They believe these spirits roam the forest floor at night, bringing disease and death.
So they want to get away from the ground.
The kakua are bound to the ground, so the extreme height of the treehouse is quite literally a physical manifestation of a spiritual defense mechanism. You climb towards the sky to escape the dark magic of the earth.
That makes perfect sense within their worldview. But here's the detail that always short-circuits my brain. You're up to 165 feet in the air. You're sitting inside a house made entirely of highly flammable dried leaves, dried bamboo, and dry wood, and yet inside these aerial tinder boxes, they build fully functioning fire pits.
It sounds like a catastrophic accident waiting to happen.
Right. I would be terrified to light a match in a dry leaf house that high up, let alone build a cooking fire. But they have perfected the engineering over generations.
How do they do it?
They cut a hole in the wooden floor and they build a thick, heavy basket out of rattan. Then they haul heavy clay up from the riverbeds and pack it into the basket in thick, insulating layers. This creates a highly effective fireproof earthen hearth right in the middle of the wooden floor. They can safely burn wood for cooking, smoking meat and warmth, and the clay entirely absorbs the heat, protecting the flammable structure around it.
It is a calculated risk, of course. An out-of-control fire at that altitude leaves virtually no escape route other than a fatal rapid descent down the notched pole. But you have to understand the environment. The humidity and dampness of the jungle canopy are relentless. Without the smoke and heat of that fire, the organic building materials would rot rapidly and the family would succumb to insect-borne diseases.
The fire is necessary.
The fire isn't a luxury. It is a critical sterilization and preservation tool. Their engineering of these clay hearths is flawlessly adapted to their needs.
It is true mastery of your materials.
Right.
Now, if we want to contrast that high-wire, terrifying jungle existence with a totally different kind of forest community, let's head over to Central Asia. Let's look at Kyrgyzstan. Tucked beneath the slopes of the Fergana mountain range is a village called Arslanbab.
Ah, Arslanbab. The visual shift from the humid Papuan jungle to the Kyrgyz mountains is dramatic.
It is, but the reliance on the trees is just as profound. Arslanbab is completely surrounded by the largest natural walnut forest on Earth. We are talking about tens of thousands of hectares of ancient, massive walnut trees.
That's massive.
Some of these trees are hundreds of years old and yield incredible amounts of nuts. And here, the forest doesn't just surround the village like a park. It entirely dictates the rhythm of life. The houses are scattered directly beneath the towering forest canopy. The boundaries between the human settlement and the wild woodland basically don't exist. You walk out your back door and you are in an ancient grove.
It is a perfect, enduring example of a symbiotic rhythm. In Arslanbab, human activity isn't fighting the forest. It is synchronized with it. The entire pace of life, the local economy, the culinary traditions, and even the spatial boundaries of the village are dictated by the growth and harvest cycles of the walnuts.
It's deeply connected.
The forest's massive root system acts like a sponge, providing a highly stable, purified water supply from streams and waterfalls, which allows for this long-term, stable settlement.
And when harvest time comes around in the autumn, it's not just a few farmers going out to work. The entire village changes gears.
Exactly. The entire community mobilizes. Families pack up and temporarily move into the forest, setting up camps among the trees. They spend weeks gathering, drying, and sorting the nuts. It is a shared livelihood and a deep cultural tradition that aligns human activity perfectly with natural botanical patterns. They aren't clearing the forest to build modern infrastructure. They're living comfortably within its existing natural architecture.
That is such a beautiful concept. Living with the architecture of nature rather than trying to overwrite it. You see something similar visually, at least in Southeast Asia. There is a small Lahu village in Thailand called Ban Jabo. It is perched directly on the crest of a jagged limestone mountain ridge in the Mae Hong Son province.
The location of Ban Jabo is entirely about exploiting the microclimate of the ridge.
And the visual payoff is stunning. Because of the specific topography and the humidity of the deep valleys below, when you wake up in Ban Jabo in the early morning, thick white clouds rise from the valleys and completely envelop the lower slopes of the settlement. From the porches of their houses, you look out and you literally feel like you are floating on a wooden island in an endless sea of clouds.
It is breathtaking, and the architecture is highly specific to that exposed ridge.
It has to be. The wind whipping over a mountain ridge can be fierce. The Lahu people build their homes primarily from wood and bamboo, but they don't use rigid, unyielding modern joints.
What do they use?
They use manual bindings, rattan ties, and interlocking wooden joints. The houses are actually designed to flex and sway slightly with the strong winds rather than resisting them and breaking. And amidst this floating bamboo village, the residents wear these stunning traditional black clothes, which are intricately hand-embroidered with brightly colored threads and decorated with heavy silver ornaments.
Flexibility over rigidity is a core survival trait in extreme environments. But if we want to look for the ultimate expression of human integration with a natural valley, without the disruption of modern machinery, we have to examine Gizu, often referred to as Gizu Village.
This place sounds like an absolute sanctuary.
It is one of the very rare inhabited places left on Earth with absolutely no roads for motorized vehicles. None. The only way to access the village is on foot, and you have to cross a long, swaying suspension bridge over a rushing river to get there. Because there are no roads, the barrier to entry for modern industrial goods is incredibly high. Every single piece of food that isn't grown locally, every piece of modern building material, every heavy tool must be carried in by human porters or pack animals.
I can't imagine having to haul a new refrigerator or a pane of glass across a swaying rope bridge.
It drastically limits what you bring into your life, which in turn preserves the traditional nature of the village. The daily life there follows the literal, unadulterated movement of the sun.
Because of the valley walls?
Because they are deep in a steep valley, the residents wake up when the sunlight finally crests the high peaks and hits the valley floor, and they naturally go to sleep as darkness quickly fills the basin in the evening. There is no roar of traffic, no light pollution, and the landscape rewards this quiet existence with these breathtaking cascading chains of natural turquoise ponds formed where the river is naturally dammed by mineral deposits. It is a life completely stripped of artificial pacing, governed entirely by the solar and hydrological cycles of the valley.
It sounds so peaceful, but also incredibly demanding. You have to be deeply self-sufficient. Now, while some cultures like the Korowai or the people of Arslanbab choose to live harmoniously within the existing trees or the natural contours of the valley, others have taken a very different approach. They have spent centuries fundamentally reshaping, scarring, and sculpting the earth itself to survive.
This brings us to the monumental art of terraforming, the terraces and the valleys.
If you want to see the absolute pinnacle of human terraforming, you have to look at Mekong Chai in northern Vietnam. This is a massive, sprawling, terraced rice field region spreading across incredibly high, steep mountain slopes. When you see aerial photographs of Mekong Chai, it doesn't even look real.
And what's painted on?
It does. The terraces spiral and curve perfectly around the sides of the mountains. I always say they look exactly like giant, vivid green or golden fingerprints pressed deep into the clay of the earth. It is mesmerizing to look at.
Those giant fingerprints, as you call them, are far more than just a beautiful landscape. They are a testament to an incredibly advanced, ancient, and necessary engineering method. Terracing isn't an aesthetic choice. It is a vital, generational terraforming project for survival.
Why go through the back-breaking labor of carving stairs into a mountain? Why not just plant seeds on the slope?
Because of gravity and water. If you plow a steep hillside and plant seeds, the first heavy monsoon rain will simply wash all the topsoil, the seeds, and the nutrients straight down the mountain and into the river. You will be left with barren rock.
So the terraces stop the water.
Carving flat fields along highly precise contour lines is the only way to slow down the water, retain the vital topsoil, and create a flat surface where water can pool, which is essential for growing rice. In Mekong Chai, the engineering doesn't stop at the dirt. They have built incredibly complex gravity-fed irrigation systems. They use hollowed-out bamboo and reed pipes that crisscross sheer cliffs and span deep ravines just to channel water from higher mountain springs down to every single tiny isolated terrace.
It is a massive hydraulic puzzle that they have solved by hand. And amidst all this intense green terraforming, the local Hmong communities maintain this beautiful, highly visual agricultural tradition. After the harvest, they dry brightly colored orange and yellow corn on the wide porches of their houses and in their wooden granaries. Against the deep green of the mountains, it creates these incredible warm explosions of color. It's so vibrant.
It is a highly aesthetic byproduct of practical storage. You see a very similar, equally spectacular terracing system over in Jiabang, China, deep in the misty mountains of Guizhou province. This is a Miao minority settlement, and it's entirely surrounded by large-scale plunging terraces. But what is specifically interesting about Jiabang is the architectural integration of the homes.
How so?
The wooden houses, which have these elegant sloped roofs, are built directly into and facing the terraces. There is no artificial boundary or buffer zone between the domestic living space and the agricultural land.
They live right in the fields.
The houses are positioned and angled specifically so that the farmers can constantly visually monitor the water levels and the health of their crops on a daily, even hourly basis, simply by looking out their windows. The village isn't separate from the farm. The village functions as a living, breathing component of the mountain's agricultural machine.
I love that concept. Your house serving as a permanent observation deck for your survival. You never truly leave work, but you are totally connected to your food source. Now, I want to contrast all that aggressive vertical mountain carving with another place in Vietnam, Bac Son. Bac Son is totally different from Mekong Chai.
Geologically, it is an entirely different puzzle.
Right. Bac Son is a rare geological anomaly. It is a perfectly flat, highly fertile limestone valley basin, completely enclosed and walled in by massive, jagged, cone-shaped limestone karst mountains. So instead of having to spend centuries aggressively carving terraces into steep slopes to create flatland, the people in Bac Son took advantage of the flatland nature already provided. All the villages sit right down the flat valley floor, directly utilizing the rich, fertile alluvial soil deposited by the rivers.
Bac Son perfectly demonstrates that when nature provides a geometrically perfect basin, human adaptation shifts from aggressive terraforming to optimal passive utilization. They don't need to sculpt the earth because they let the towering limestone mountains do the heavy lifting of weather regulation.
Exactly. Those mountains act like a giant protective fortress wall. They create a perfectly enclosed microclimate that shelters the valley floor from extreme winds, traps the morning fog for moisture, and perfectly controls the sunlight. Because the agricultural rhythm there is so sheltered and stable, the entire valley floor is planted with rice.
And it changes with the seasons.
During the seasonal cycles, the entire basin turns uniformly vividly green, and then right before harvest, it turns uniformly golden. If you stand on one of the peaks looking down, it looks like a giant, flat, textured carpet changing colors in a bowl of stone.
It's a profound example of geographic opportunism. But we've been talking a lot about earth and stone. What happens when the dominant element dictating your life isn't solid ground, but water? This raises an important question about how societies conquer and adapt to the most unpredictable, fluid, and dangerous environments on the planet. Let's transition to the water worlds, the oceans, the deep ice, and the rushing rivers.
Water is completely unforgiving. It entirely dictates the identity, the layout, and the daily schedule of these settlements. Take Hue Po Keng in northern Thailand, for example. This is a riverside village located near the Myanmar border. It is home to a Karen community who are widely known globally for the long-neck women who wear heavy coiled brass rings around their necks.
Which is a deep-rooted, highly visible cultural marker of identity and aesthetic tradition.
Yes, but what I find fascinating is the physical layout of their village. It isn't built around a centralized square or a town hall like a traditional European village. The architecture is entirely dictated by the flow of the Paya River. It's a highly elongated, linear layout. They build these traditional bamboo and wooden houses with thatched roofs, but every single house is raised high up on thick wooden stilts. They stretch along the dirt paths, directly paralleling the river corridor.
And those stilts aren't for storing livestock like we saw in the Himalayas.
No, they're purely defensive. The river is their lifeline for transport and water, but during the monsoon season, it turns into a massive threat. The river swells rapidly and floods the banks. The houses are raised high specifically to adapt to this unpredictable seasonal flooding. The water flows under their living rooms rather than through them. Water literally shapes the footprint and the elevation of their entire society.
A river shapes a village, but an ocean can shape the world. Water also dictates geopolitics and global history. Let's zoom way out to the Banda Islands in Indonesia. This is a tiny, incredibly remote, volcanic archipelago rising out of the deep abyssal waters of the Banda Sea.
If you look at it on a map today, it just looks like a tropical paradise. You've got these narrow, palm-fringed coastlines, crystal clear blue seas, perfect for diving, imposing stone forts, and dense tropical forests covering volcanic peaks.
But historically, the Banda Islands carried an immense, almost unfathomable geopolitical weight. For centuries, this tiny speck of islands lost in a massive ocean was the absolute center of global conflict. Why? Because it was the only place on planet Earth that produced nutmeg.
Which just sounds so crazy to us today. We have nutmeg sitting in a plastic jar in our spice racks for $2, but back then, why was it so valuable?
In the medieval and early modern periods, spices weren't just for flavoring lattes. Nutmeg, native only to the highly specific volcanic soils and climate of the Banda Islands, was believed to cure diseases, including the plague. It was used as a powerful preservative for meat before refrigeration, and it was the ultimate status symbol for European elites.
Yeah.
Because it was so rare and localized, it was worth its weight in gold.
And that rarity drew in the European empires like sharks to blood.
It did. The Portuguese, the Dutch, the English, they all sailed thousands of miles across deadly oceans to fight over this tiny archipelago. The strategic value of this single plant caused massive bloody conflicts, led to the horrific subjugation of the local population by the Dutch East India Company, and literally reshaped global trade routes and the borders of empires. The amount of wealth extracted and the blood spilled over this tiny waterlogged volcanic soil is historically astounding.
It is a profound, terrifying example of how extreme geographic isolation can incubate a biological resource so rare that the entire world comes knocking with cannons, changing the destiny of the local population forever. But isolation by water takes many different forms. Sometimes the water isn't a warm tropical sea hiding spices. Sometimes it's a terrifying ocean of solid ice.
You are thinking of Mongolia.
I am. Let's consider Khatgal, a town in northern Mongolia. Now, Mongolia is the world's second largest landlocked country. It is famous for its endless dry steppes and deserts. Yet Khatgal sits directly on the southern shores of Lake Khuvsgol. This is a massive, ancient, deep body of water that holds nearly 70% of Mongolia's entire freshwater reserves and a significant percentage of the planet's unfrozen freshwater. Khatgal lies at this incredibly rare, stark geographical boundary where the dense, dark Siberian taiga forests meet the vast, sweeping open grasslands of Central Asia.
It is an ecological crossroads, but also has a highly unusual military history.
This is my absolute favorite thing about Khatgal. though. It is the sheer absurdity and charm of its modern history because it sits on this massive lake. Khatgal was for a long time the official base of the Mongolian Navy. I want you to really think about that. A completely landlocked country sandwiched between Russia and China operating a navy.
It sounds like a contradiction in terms.
It does. And what did this grand navy consist of? A single solitary tugboat called the Sukbatar III. It had a crew of 7 sailors, and reportedly, at times during its operation, only one of those 7 sailors actually knew how to swim. It's just a brilliant, funny quirk of geography and politics. But make no mistake, Khatgal is no joke when it comes to extreme environmental survival.
The winters there are legendary.
Brutal is the word. In the winter, the temperatures in Khatgal plummet to minus 40 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in minutes. That massive, deep, turbulent lake freezes completely solid. It turns into this breathtaking, terrifying, crystalline blue marble scarred by massive natural ice cracks that run for kilometers across the surface. The ice gets so thick that heavy trucks use it as a winter highway.
And the visual contrasts in the town itself are striking.
Totally. While the lake is frozen solid and the air hurts to breathe, you have massive long-haired yaks just casually walking down the main snow-packed dirt streets among these heavy Siberian-style wooden log cabins. The yaks don't care. They are built for it. It is a town of total extremes, gentle, beautiful, vibrant green summers, and absolutely brutal, deadly, deep freeze winters.
The image of a yak casually scrolling past a frozen landlocked naval base is uniquely Khatgal. We've talked about fighting the